Buongiorno mondo and welcome back to 15 with Vasca, the podcast. I'm delighted to be speaking again today about contemporary Italian society with Francesca Lupia, my former student, Stanford alumna, and an anthropologist who's currently doing a PhD program at Florence's European University Institute. Welcome back, Francesca. Next time, but Florence happens to be, it's experiencing an interesting moment. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of foreign creatives coming in as well. But also what I'm seeing the same thing you're seeing. So the people that I'm seeing who are actually really making those career leaps are freelance professionals who are very young and who are techies. Yeah. And that's pretty much the only group that I'm seeing, because it's a whole different universe.
Yeah, maybe I should have taken more than that one computer science class when I was at Stanford.
You know what? I think it's okay. I think the world needs more anthropologists. I think the world needs more people who are doing the kind of work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And I think it's important that you and I are talking about it today, because it is part of the current debate here. Yeah. And I think a lot of our listeners who are thinking about coming to Italy today need to be aware of these things. Yeah. And so that is sort of a segue into my last two questions for you. One is really about, it's a very personal question, but I know you've talked about it before. You forget. What is it like being gay in Italy today? Is it easy? Is it hard? I can't imagine it's like at Stanford or in San Francisco.
Oh, absolutely not. And I am very lucky to have come from places in the United States where I felt very comfortable being myself, being open. I grew up in the Midwest, but I grew up in Ann Arbor, Michigan, which is a college town. It's very left wing. And then I went to Stanford, which is in the Bay Area. And then I arrived here, and I should preface it by saying, I've never felt in danger because of being an out gay person. I've never felt like I was, at risk of being attacked or something like that when I'm out with my partner and in public. But it has been kind of sobering to know that, it's a place that I think has much more traditional norms about, really more than anything, gender than in the United States, at least the parts of it where I've lived, which has kind of been more my experience, the idea of this is how men should behave, this is how women should behave. And I think that ties into how the LGBTQ community ends up being treated. I've seen it really much more through the experiences of my partner, who presents herself in a more androgynous, gender non-conforming way, and the way that she just gets a lot of judgment and criticism, even from prospective employers, for example, for being someone who's perceived as a woman but presents herself in a way where she's visibly, not conforming to gender expectations, where she's someone who might be, easily identified as part of the LGBT community. She's had a lot of experiences of people saying, you'll never be able to get a job in law, for example, if you have short hair, if you don't wear makeup, if you're dressing in this particular way. So that's, I think, been very discouraging for her, and it's sort of taken being very close to somebody who's, I think, experiencing a lot more open homophobia to be able to see that, which has been very sad. And I think it's been very hard, even in Florence, which I didn't really expect to find LGBTQ community in the same kind of way that I was able to in the Bay Area, for example. And I think that that's really a major consideration that both my partner and I are having about whether or not we want to stay in Italy for the long term. She's very set on at least wanting to spend some time in a place where she feels like she doesn't constantly have the kind of microscope on her for the way that she's presenting herself. And, I can't claim to speak for how gay men's experience or trans people's experience might be, but I think there might be a bit more sort of open risk to people's safety if they are trans or if they are, for example, a gay man. I think, honestly, being a gay woman in Italy, people sort of forget you exist sometimes. So whenever there's sort of this fiery sort of public rhetoric about, the LGBT lobby, as certain figures in the current government like to say, it's really all sort of focused on gay men and on trans people, and gay women sort of vanish from the debate whatsoever. But it's I won't, obviously I'm lucky. Well, I don't know if I should say lucky, but it's good that I haven't had to worry about my safety but it has been really sometimes an isolating experience, and sometimes an experience that makes me really angry to see how, for example, my partner, grew up with all of these, even for a young girl who had sort of more traditionally seen as masculine interests and activities. She was always, she liked to play soccer, and she would get a lot of comments of, a girl wanting to play soccer. Maybe that's changing a bit. And she does come from an area, she comes from Lucca, which is known sometimes for being
it's a little conservative. More conservative.
But I think that these expectations just are not something I had necessarily come up against as much in the U.S. and it's been hard sometimes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It sort of sounds like, and this is something I'd actually really like to invite you back to talk about, just about sort of female sexuality, how women are perceived in general in Italian culture, how female sexuality is, I think a lot of Italian women's identity is tied into this whole, it's the whole Madonna horror thing.
Oh, absolutely.
I think lesbianism just throws everyone for a loop, right?
Yeah, totally. Well, I get a lot. In the United States, so I don't know. I don't consider myself to be extremely feminine, but I have longer hair. I wear makeup. I wear dress. I'm wearing a dress right now, and I think in the United States, at least in the Bay Area, people were they didn't have this reaction of shock when I would say that I was a lesbian. And here, I think there's this idea of if lesbians exist, they must fit into this very specific mold of looking a certain way, of behaving a certain way. So yeah, I agree with what you're saying, that it kind of blows people's minds a little bit.
Yeah, it's strange. I think there's a lot that needs to happen. A lot needs to change.
Yeah.
Both, it's just those cultural things that just Italy's not really there yet.
Yeah.
I would just say also in terms of also where we as women are in general.
Totally.
It's a complicated society because women sort of dominate the households, and so they're sort of informing and controlling everything that goes on in the private sphere, but also women are very present in the public sphere as well.
Yeah.
And so
but also, especially with the last couple of, and I know we have to wrap up, but the last year with Giorgia Meloni using the fact that using the fact that she is a mother in her campaign, and I think touching at least, she obviously is the most powerful person in Italy at the moment, but I think that the fact that she sort of had this somewhat I don't know the right words to use here, but this idea of her femininity that was not a threat necessarily to the dominant ideas of how a woman should act was instrumental in her being able to occupy that role.
The interesting thing about Meloni, and maybe we'll talk about this the next time, is that despite the fact that she bills herself as being exactly what you just said, but she's not married.
Exactly. And that is interesting.
It's so funny, right?
Yeah.
So you would think, this traditional cultural, this woman who's really basically a man, right?
Yeah.
But she says she's representing all these traditional roles, of Italian society, but she's not married, which is interesting.
Right.
She has a long-term partner, etc. But
I would love to talk about that.
We're going to talk about that next time, Francesca. Okay. My last question
Yes.
was actually a suggestion from a fellow Stanford alumna
Yeah.
who said to me that she thinks that since my company is called Ask Fosca and this is 15 with Fosca, that it would be fun if every guest asked me a question at the end of the podcast. So is there something that you want to ask me now, or is this something that you wish you had asked me before coming to Italy?
Yeah, I think this is something that, we've talked a lot about the sort of social position and responsibilities and expectations of young people and the opportunities that are available as a result. The kind of idea that young people remain part of the family unit up until sort of, I think, a later age than is expected in the United States. And that's definitely been my experience as a young person coming here without my family, coming here by myself in the last few years. And as I understand it, you sort of did a similar thing, but 25 years ago.
Right.
And so I'm interested to hear your perspective on how, if at all, that those expectations have developed in that time.
Oh, wow. That's a big question. When I came to Florence, and I'll try to be as brief as possible, but it was in some ways exactly the same.
Okay.
And I'm sure this is, your experience as well. And then in other ways, it was just a totally different universe. And so those of us who were expats, for example, really tried, at least I had no friends who were Americans. Mm-hmm. My only friends are Italians or foreigners. I have American friends now, but at the time, it was like I was trying so hard to be an insider and trying so hard to also make a career for myself, which was really hard, Francesca. And so, here I am coming from the States, and coming from a fantastic job that I loved in New York in the music business. I had an MA from Brown University, and I was like, oh yeah, it's all going to be good. And it was really hard here. And I think that a lot of people, and something I see in my generation, but that has definitely changed for the younger generations, but with my generation, it was just like, I think we accepted things in sort of a, I don't want to say a passive way, but we were just sort of conditioned to, you accept it, you work hard, eventually it'll all pay off type of thing. Yeah. I think the thing I see about young Italians today that actually is quite exciting for me is that they're standing up for themselves. And so we'll go back to sort of the beginning of our conversation that young Italians are saying, no, this is not cool anymore. Right. And we shouldn't all be leaving. Yeah. The great brain drain, right? Yeah. So the best Italians, whatever that means, but the creme de la creme, they need to stay here. And by Italians, I mean everybody. I don't just mean, who Maloney defines as Italian. Young people who are currently living in Italy ideally should stay in Italy because Italians aren't, this is really, we need to talk another day about this. I really didn't even answer the question at all, but Italians aren't having babies. And, yet the country is not ready for this kind of mass immigration and to find those ways to incorporate, for example, bilingual education in the public schools. This is something that was happening in the States 50, 60 or more years ago. Exactly. And so I don't know when we'll get there, but I think a lot of things have changed and are changing. I have a lot of faith in this generation and in your generation, also my daughter's generation. And I think Italy is at an interesting crossroads. And I think that right now it's one of those sort of do or die moments. And I think we'll just have to see what the summer brings. And then you and I'm going to invite you back in the fall and we'll keep talking about all this good stuff. And I'm just so happy that you came here and chatted with me today.
I'm so happy as well. Honestly,
Thank
you. These are things that I don't necessarily get to talk about very often, because really? I don't have a lot of American friends here either, to be honest. Yeah. Most of my friends are other foreigners or young Italians, and I think I chatted with it a little bit this year when I was working with students at NYU Florence who were kind of coming up against these things in little ways in their study abroad experiences, and being able to sort of talk and think through those things with them was nice as well. But yeah, these are definitely topics that are on my mind a lot, and it was really great to be able to talk to somebody who's had a lot of similar experiences and also obviously many more years than I've been here as well of perspective.
Exactly.
So, yeah.
Well, I can't wait until you come back. And thank you so much for coming today.
Of course.
And we'll talk soon about whatever you want, actually. I think we should come up with, or whatever our listeners want. Yeah. Something that I'm encouraging our listeners to do is also write in and ask if they want to hear either Francesca and me talk about something else, or just Francesca talk about something else, or maybe just me. Anyway, thanks again, and until next time.
Until next time.
Ciao, ciao.
Ciao.
Grazie mille. Thank you so much, Francesca, for such a great talk today. And thanks as always to my listeners for tuning in to Ask Fosca. Arrivederci e grazie mille ancora.